Alright, in this video on the Illustrator interface, we're going to be looking at how to work with placeholders. Now, specifically in the world of design, using placeholders is a great way of establishing where you want things to go in your design, even if you don't have them ready yet. So it's kind of a precursor or a way to get things started, to conceptualize the work. So we're going to get started on that now. We've already worked on setting up our document with its guidelines so that we know we can lock things into our design just by aligning them with these guides. Again, another way to create the basic framework for our design area. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to add some basic placeholder shapes to our design in order to set up the design for where we want media later. So what we're going to start with is we're going to basically look at the design and we're going to work from the back forward to the front. So with any Illustrator document, you always want to establish a background color for your work. Now usually I would say like that might be one of the last things we want to do, but it's good to know what we want for that though. Or at least a shape to represent it, right? So first off, let's go over to our toolbar over here on the left side of the screen, and we're going to locate our shape drawing tools. Now these are the very basics. These are also available in Photoshop, by the way, but if you go down your list you should see a rectangle. Click and hold on that. That will show you all of your basic shape drawing tools that you can use. Now these are all vector based drawing tools, so you can re-edit the shape that you draw as many times as you like without losing quality along the way. Wonderful thing to be able to do. We're going to use primarily rectangles and probably an ellipse to represent the mouth area. So let's get out our rectangle and come into our design space, and we're going to draw a shape that just represents our background rectangle. And when you want a fill color inside of Illustrator, this is the easiest way to add a background. It's not like Photoshop where you can dump paint all over the screen and fill in an empty area. It just doesn't work that way with vector-based graphics. You have to define a shape or form on screen to fill with a color. So I'm just going to start outside my line, my border here of my work area, and drag out a rectangle that is larger than the actual borders of my artboard. So notice the little blue line I'm dragging around. Just let it go right about there. Now when I release it, it doesn't give it a fill color automatically, and that's okay because at this stage we're just blocking out our design and wireframing it with shapes to represent areas of design. So we have that for our background, and I want you to look over here on your panels area. You should have a layers panel, and inside that layers panel you are going to have new layers generated automatically every time that you add something to your scene. This is kind of a unique part of Illustrator in that it will generate a brand new layer every time that you draw one new line on screen. It will assume you need a new layer for it. So in the layers panel, just so you kind of see what it looks like over here, the layers are organized as a top main layer, and then inside of it are sub-layers. So the top layer is just a container, or you can think of it as like a folder, and beneath it are all of the actual layers of drawn imagery. So there's our rectangle, which we actually want it to represent our background. So if we want to rename it, you can just double click on the title of it here in the layer box, and then rename it background. There you go. Now that's pretty easy to do. Now it's the only drawing we have so far, but we need to add more, right? So we're going to do the screen next, so we'll use another rectangle to do that, and I'm going to use my guides on the inside of my design. So I'm going to start by drawing the outer rectangle first. So I'm going to start in the upper corner and go all the way down to the opposite corners of my guides, and it should lock on automatically. So there's my outer screen, so I'm going to call that my outer screen, and then I'm going to come in, and now it gets tricky if you're not careful. Illustrator has these little representative on-screen controls for any shapes you draw, especially rectangles. You don't want to click and drag on those on accident because then it will start to round off all the corners of your design. So you may have to zoom in by using Command plus so that those don't get too close to your next set of border lines. And then you can start clicking and dragging across your screen. Now remember, if you run out of screen at any point, just hold down, you can also just drag it out as far as you can and then let it go and we can resize it. So I'm just going to let it go and zoom out with Command minus a couple times. And if I want to change the scale of this one that's currently up, just move your mouse over the corner square controller box and drag. And we want this to be the inner screen square. So I'm just going to drag this to my edge of my inner guidelines around the border here to drop it and let it go on those. And just make sure that it actually is sitting on those. There we go. Okay, so that's my other borders. This is my inner screen. And now what we're going to do is we're going to draw a representative circle for our mouth area. And again, we're just going to use a temporary placeholder for this. So this is just to get you used to the idea of blocking out a design space is what this exercise is all about. So we'll turn on our ellipse. And instead of trying to draw an arbitrary circle from the outer edges, we're going to start from the inside center here, approximate center of the area. And to draw a perfect circle from the center, it requires a little bit of keystroke action. So pay attention. The keys you want to hold down when you want to draw from your center point outwards in a perfect circle, you're going to hold down Shift and Alt or Option. Notice how the cursor changes to a circle. And then you're going to click and drag. Notice as I click and drag with those keys down that it makes a perfect circle. This is great. This is almost exactly what we want. Now, notice that the mouth does reach further out beyond the boundaries of this area. So if we wanted it to be a little bit more oblong, we could let go of Shift and then just kind of freehand drag out our circle along the edges. Now we can get it to lock to the top and bottom and then just kind of pull on the sides a little bit. Now mine was not perfectly placed because one side of my circle goes outside the guide. And that may not be a bad thing, but we'll leave it right there. And then you can use your arrow keys to kind of nudge the circle or slide it around a little bit, just to kind of reposition it in between these guides on screen so that we have it kind of nicely centered on those. Okay, so we got our outer circle, or our circle, our screen, our background. We might even add some lines here to represent this particular shape. And we're going to use the pen tool real quick to hack this shape out. Let's go back to our toolbar. And we're going to go to the pen tool this time. Pen tool is a mighty tool in the toolbox of a digital designer or artist. This will allow you to create vector lines that you can edit over and over and over on screen. So we'll start off by turning it on. And we're going to come down here to the bottom of our screen and generate our first lines for this with this tool. So this is how the pen tool works. First, it's a click and point tool. It is not a click and drag necessarily. That's probably most people's misinterpretation of this tool, is that you have to click and drag to draw with it, but it doesn't work like a brush. And the name is a little deceiving in that sense. So watch what I do first. So I'm going to click to drop a reference point. And then from there, after I've clicked, it shows this little extension line that goes out from my pen to let me know that the next time I click, it's going to create a connection between these two lines, or for this line to stop at. So I'm going to give it a point right about here, because what I'm going to do is generate an arc with this. So watch what we do. We'll click once there. Now we're going to move to the corner, and I'm just clicking across the screen as I go. And I'm going up above the guide a little bit, overlapping. And then I'm going to complete the shape by going all the way back to the first point that I dropped from my pen tool to close the shape to make it official. And that'll make kind of a simple starter shape for that area. So now we've got our starter shapes dropped. Great. We want to make sure we also relabel those. So this one we just made, that's the base of the computer. You can call that the stand over here in your layer panel. And then for the one that's the circle, we want to double click on its name and call it mouth. Now remember, all of these are just that. They are just placeholders. So we need to keep that in mind when we're working with layers like this. If you want to work with it in your layer panel the correct way, keep them organized and separated from the rest of your design correctly. So I'm going to add a brand new layer by clicking this little layer button at the bottom. See how it made layer 2? And we're going to call that placeholders. I'm just going to double click on it, call it placeholders. And then I'm going to select all the layers that represent my placeholders so far and drag them and drop them over that one. So now I've got all my placeholders in there. Great. Alright. And you can actually rename layer 1 while we're at it. And we can just call this one framework. And now we're in pretty good shape. One other thing to notice inside the layers panel, these are just some quick notes to let you know about. First off, if you ever want to reactivate a part or an object in your screen, you can do it from the layers panel directly. So if I want my mouth circle to turn back on, notice it's not visible because we didn't apply a color to it earlier. That's why they were all see-through whenever we dropped them. But if I want to see its outline shape, I can just click on this little reference circle over here that they call a target. And notice it pulls it back up on screen as an active selection. It'll tell you it's an active selection inside the layer panel by showing a colored square next to that particular object. And if you want to have multiple objects turned on at once, just hold down Shift and click on those other respective objects, or click on them again to deselect them. And that's kind of a unique feature within the Illustrator interface as far as layer navigation is concerned. Okay, so we dropped in our placeholder text. Now we need to add in some text boxes to work with. So we've got places for our main title, some subtitles in the mouth, and the paragraph text that we will use as the informational guidelines for the poster. So let's go ahead and establish those. We're going to go to our Type tool now from our toolbar. So that's the letter T over here. And this is going to allow us to create a text box. Now, text inside of Illustrator can work multiple ways. There are many, many ways that you can create text in here, and I'm just going to show you a couple quick ones at the moment, and then we'll go in more depth as we design inside the space. So let's get started with dropping off just a couple placeholders. So to do placeholder text, first off, we really don't want any of these excess layers turned on. You really don't want any other shape layers turned on while you're designing with the Type tool. Otherwise, if you accidentally click on a shape with the Type tool, it will create something called area type, which is not what we want to start with. We will go into that, but not today, or not on this video. So let's drop some boxes on screen. Alright, so I'm going to start off by creating one for the main title here. Make sure that your type box is a square dotted line around it and not a circle. If it shows a circle when you're moving around on screen, that means it's detected a selection shape on screen somewhere. Just going to click and drag out one to represent the entire area of this text box for language and leave that right there. And after I drop it, I'm going to rename this box main title, or just call it title. And then we need two more boxes for top and bottom. So we're just going to reactivate the Type tool by hitting the T tool again. And then I'm just going to make another box right here and call that box, whoops, sorry. Oh, I deleted the title. When you delete the title, it'll ask you to rename it like this. So just put subtitle 1. And then we'll create another type box down here at the bottom. And I'm going to rename that one subtitle 2. And then we have our 3 paragraphs. So let's make a box for each of those. So I'm going to call this one paragraph 1. Reactivate my Type tool, come back down here. Again, you have to be careful so it doesn't show that goofy circular type area. Paragraph 2. And then we'll do one last one over here on the side and call it paragraph 3. All right, so now we have the basic blocked out zones for our design by adding just a few placeholders to our screen. So again, as you go through designing inside of Illustrator, please make sure that you are renaming imagery that you add to screen actively. It's a bad idea to design and not keep up with your layer stacks as you go. And again, as you get through this part of the process, try to keep your layer stack down to just these basic 2 groups of placeholders and your framework, which just includes your guides and your original reference imagery. Okay? All right. We'll pick up on the next video with working with dropping in our reference text into the background that we'll use, and also to add actual placeholder text to our boxes.